We want to give a huge welcome to all the virtual members of Columbine United Church. You know, those of you who are joining us from around the world, and some of you even overseas, we know that this is where you go to church, that you tune in with us because this is your church home. And we want you to know that even though you are hooking in with us, you know, via YouTube or the internet, you are just as important as if you were sitting right here. And it's so good to have you. Let's give these folks a warm Columbine welcome. Yeah, very good. Our scripture passage for this morning on Valentine's Day comes to us from John 13, verses 34 through 35. Listen for God's word as it comes to us today. This is Jesus. Jesus says, "Let me give you a new command. Love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other." Now let me back up. I'm going to read that again. I want you to think about your Valentine. I want you to think about who it is that's special to you today. It could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be your partner, it could be your kids, it could be your grandkids, it could be your neighbor, it could be someone who's important to you. Think about who that person is today as I read the passage again. Jesus says, "Let me give you a new command. Love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. And this is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other." And there the reading ends. May God bless these words now as we seek to apply them to our lives. Think about Jesus, think about love. Valentine's Day, boy, if you're new to Columbine, then you need to know that Valentine's Day is an important day here in the life of the church. I mean to tell you, Dick Cable is in church. I'm just looking over here. Let's give Dick a huge round of applause. Dick has been so ill. Man, seeing you here today is a huge thing. And I want you to know that I consider it nothing less than a miracle that you are with us today. Man, it is just absolutely fantastic to have you here. So Valentine's Day, you know, Valentine's Day is a big thing in my household. Woohoo! Your Super Bowl was last week. It means nothing compared to Valentine's Day. You know, for the first about 28 years of my marriage, my wife would say, "Oh, Valentine's Day is my favorite holiday." And I would go, "Goodness gracious." And you know, and this was like, you know, for 28 years of my marriage, until finally it dawned on me, don't be such an oaf. It's her favorite holiday. And, you know, and so I said, if it's her favorite holiday, then I had to go out of my way to figure out how to make it, you know, a special holiday for my wife. And so I came up with this whole idea. I said, well, there's the 12 days of Christmas. I should make it the 14 days of love, the 14 days of love. Well, I know, that's a huge stretch for me, Mr. Unromantic. You know, I came up with the 14 days of love, and it starts on, you know, the first day of Valentine's, the first day of February. On the dining room table, there's all kinds of Valentine's decorations. There's a big bouquet of flowers, a big Valentine balloon. And I mean, so I know, 1, 2, 3, oh. And when I went to King Soopers, I was buying, you know, the balloon and the flowers and all the decorations. The lady who was helping me said, "Boy, do you have a brother?" I said, "Yeah, but he's not very romantic at all. You wouldn't want him." And, you know, and every day of Valentine's, you know, of the 14 days, there's a new little gift, there's a new little something. Kind of just something for me to help her know that I love her so much. You know, being married for me is such an important thing. I've come to love Valentine's Day, but I love being married. And, you know, it makes me think about Jesus. You know, Jesus was a lot of things. But you know something that Jesus wasn't? Jesus wasn't married. Jesus was not married. You know why? Things would be radically different in the Bible if Jesus were married. I mean, all those legends, no. Jesus wasn't married, because if Jesus was married, he wouldn't be hanging out with 12 of his best friends all the time. He would not be partying with prostitutes if Jesus were married. He would not be hanging out with sinners and prostitutes. If Jesus were married, let me tell you something. If Jesus were married, the only storm that he would be stilling is when he came home with those 12 buddies of his late for dinner and expected his wife to feed everybody. If Jesus were married, the only person who would be walking on water, if he was smart, would be his wife. Right? If Jesus were married. You know, Jesus, was he romantic? Was Jesus romantic? You know, I think if Jesus were married, I think that Jesus would be very romantic. I mean, because when you think about Jesus, you look at all the different stories that Jesus taught, Jesus was always talking about love. It was kind of the foundation of who he was. He was always talking about all different kinds of love. And that's why I think when we think about Jesus, we need to think about love. And that's our Lenten theme, was think about Jesus. You know, many of you might not know that Lent is the season of the church year that we're in right now. The season of Epiphany stopped, and we are now in Lent. Lent is the 40 days that lead up to Easter, and Lent has its own color, purple. And I was in kind of an existential question: do I wear purple or do I wear red today? Because purple is the color for Lent. And I asked my wife, and she said, "Do you even need to ask? You need to ask? You wear red." And many of you are wearing red, the Valentine color. I love it. I love it. So we're in the season of Lent, and the purpose of Lent is to expand our souls, to be a time of reflection and introspection, so our souls can expand. Lent means the lengthening of days, and isn't it great to see that the sun is setting later and later? And I just love that we're having more and more light, the lengthening of days, and that's the season of Lent. And so that for this year, what I want us to do is to think about Jesus. And some of you might think, well, isn't that the same thing as what would Jesus do? WWJD, what would Jesus do? And it's not really, because what would Jesus do is reactive. You're in a situation, don't know quite how to act, and you ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Which is good, because it helps you kind of develop an ethical standard by which you're going to live. What would Jesus do? But instead of being reactive, I want us to be proactive. I want us to think like Jesus. I want us to put on the mindset of Jesus. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, every single Sunday I tell you, you are the living embodiment of God. You are the living embodiment of Christ. The only God people are ever going to see is you. The only Christ that people are going to see is you. And if that's the case, then you need to be able to thinking like Jesus so that your identity is Christ's identity. And it's a paradigm shift. That's why we had these little Lenten bracelets made, Think Like Jesus. And I've been wearing my bracelet for the past couple of weeks. As soon as they came in, I put mine on and been wearing it. And it's kind of a profound thing, even for a minister, to have this reminder with you all the time. So anytime I think about getting short with somebody or getting short with my spouse or short with my kids, I see that bracelet and I go, wow, think like Jesus. Just don't react, think like Jesus. And so that's going to be our Lent theme for the next several weeks leading up to Easter. We can look at the different ideas that will help you understand what it means to think like Jesus. And today, thinking like Jesus is to think about love, because it is his foundation. If you want to talk about the glasses that Jesus wore when he looked at the world, it was all about love. I mean, just think about the different things that he taught. This passage is one that you all know, or that you should know, where somebody asked Jesus, what is the summation of the Bible? What is the summation of the law and the prophets? And Jesus said very, very clearly, the first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So you're loving God, you're loving yourself, and you're loving your neighbor. And it's not an option. This is not something that you can kind of choose to do or choose not to do. No, it is the foundation of our faith, is love. Whether it's romantic love, whether it's brother or sisterly love, whether it's divine love, it is the foundation of who we are. And then Jesus takes it even further in the 13th chapter of John. Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just like I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And again, look at this. It's a commandment. It's not an option. You are to be people of love. We are to be people of love. We are to be people of love for the people that are easy to love. Spouses, kids, partners, best friends. And we're to be people of love for those people that are hard to love. Think about your coworker that just is like cranky, or the boss that maybe is cranky. It's not an option. You have to figure out how to love that person. That neighbor, that you just hate, that just makes you nuts. Not an option. You got to figure out how to love that person. That presidential candidate that you just can't stand. And I know that you on both sides of the fence have that one candidate that you can't stand because you always come and confess your sins to me about how you hate that person. Not an option. Hating is not a part of the vocabulary. Not if you're going to be a child of God. You have got to, as a child of God, as a follower of Jesus, because people are going to know that you follow Jesus by your love. Then you are the ones who have to introduce into the conversation, well, then how do we love ISIS? I understand people, you're in the middle of a conversation and people are, let's bomb them back to the Stone Age. That's fine, but how is that a reflection of God's love for them? The whole very difficult conversation about refugees, very difficult conversations about immigrants. And you hear all the debates going on. You are the people of faith who are supposed to introduce into the conversation, well, what does it mean to love them? How do we invite love into this conversation? Because it's not an option. It's a commandment. You are here today because you say that you are a child of God. You are here today because you believe that you are a follower of Jesus. And then it's not an option. And then, the entire New Testament becomes a distillation of it. The love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13, the Apostle Paul, that whole chapter, I'll never forget when I was a little boy and I discovered that passage because our family always sat in the fourth row back on the left-hand side. I was a third chair in. Never forget that. And I had this one Bible in front of me. And one time every time the minister he would drone on, I just started picking up the Bible and I started reading. I'll never forget when I stumbled upon the love chapter. I dog-eared that page. I didn't know if that was illegal or not, to dog-ear a Bible page. But I started memorizing the love chapter when I was a little boy. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries, but have not love, I am nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not irritable or resentful. It's not arrogant or rude. And it goes on. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Faith, hope, and love. These three abide. And the greatest of these is love. The greatest of these is love. Then the author of 1 John writes, he who does not love does not know God. For God is love. And we have known and believed the love that God has for us. God is love. And he who abides in love abides in God and God in him. It's the foundation of our faith. It's the foundation of our identity. It's the foundation of our relationship with God that we are to be lovers. We are to abide in God's love. And we are to express that love. What does that look like? Expressing God's love. We're going to think like Jesus. We're going to think about expressing God's love. When I was sitting there writing the sermon, I was thinking to myself, so how would I talk about how I express God's love? And I came down with, there are three things that I keep on distilling, because I kept on thinking about my marriage, I kept on thinking about my relationship with my kids, I kept on thinking about my relationship with my mom and my mother-in-law, and I kept thinking about my relationship with my siblings and my nieces and my nephews and my best friends and the strangers that I know that I run into. And I think about three things. I think about sacrifice, I think about servanthood, I think about gratitude. Jesus taught us so many different things. I think one of the most profound things he taught us is how to sacrifice, how to be a living sacrifice. And one of his great passages on this is, my command is this. Look at this. It's like he had to remind us over and over. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one more than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Greater love has no person than to lay down their life for a friend. And I believe that if you want your relationships to blossom, you will become a sacrificial lover. You will sacrifice yourself on behalf of your lover. You will give your entire being without expecting anything back in return. One of the best advice I ever received early on in my marriage was to give in such a way and expect nothing in return. Not expecting your lover to meet your needs. No, you're going to meet their needs. And and guys, you have a tough time with this because I know that guys are scorekeepers. You do the dishes, it's worth 5 points. You go grocery shopping, it's worth 25 points. You're now at 35. You clean the house, it's worth 75 points. You've broken the 100-point barrier. And it's that 100-point barrier that is kind of the magic number. That if you break that 100-point barrier, you're going to get something. You're going to do something. You get some type of special privilege because, baby, you are it. You are it. And you need to know that women keep score as well. They keep score as well. Everything gets 1 point. Washing dishes, 1 point. Grocery shopping, 1 point. Cleaning house, 1 point. So you've broken 100 and they're at 3. And what you need to know is keeping score ruins relationships. Because you're suddenly trying to get something out of a relationship. Where no, this is about love, and love is about sacrifice. Love is about completely sacrificing yourself for somebody. And then, the powerful thing about it is then the reciprocity that happens. Because then they begin to ask, why are you acting so weird? Why are you acting so good? And why is acting good so weird? Isn't that the crazy thing? It's because I love you. I love you so much that I want to give myself completely and totally to you. To be a sacrificial lover. To be a sacrificial lover for your kids. To be a sacrificial lover for your co-workers, for your colleagues. That's one of the things that we constantly try to do here at the church is, okay, how can we give ourselves and really be good teammates with and for one another? Sacrificial love. The other thing for me is servanthood. What does it mean to be a servant? This is a picture that depicts Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and it was the Last Supper in John's Gospel. And when they came in, he took off his outer garment, he wrapped a robe around himself or a towel around himself, and he went and he washed the disciples' feet. And then he got up, he took his plate at the table, placed it at the table, and he said, look at what I've just done, I expect you to do for each other. And that's when he said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. And every time I read that, I think to myself, what does that look like? What does that look like in a marriage? How do I wash my wife's feet? My wife loves to have her feet rubbed, But what does it look like more than that? How do I wash my wife's feet? How do I wash my kids' feet? How do I wash my kids' feet? We often talk about going from good to great in our businesses. I want to know how we go from good to great in our relationships. How do we go from good to great in those significant relationships that we have with one another? For me personally, I just don't want a good marriage. I don't want a good marriage. I want a great marriage. In fact, I want to go from good to great to glowing. I want to glow. I want a marriage that glows. How do you do this? And for me, it keeps on coming back to what it means to be a servant. That I started looking at people who I thought had really good marriages, and they've been married for a really long time. And I started talking with them about their marriages and what made their marriages work. And you know what these people would talk about? These people talk about meeting each other's needs. They would talk about giving themselves in such a way that they poured themselves out. And they talked about being a servant to the other person. And so I started asking myself, well, what does it mean to be a servant to my wife? And for me, it's little things. I decided that it's little things. For me, I've realized that life can be such a grind that what we need are the little things. The big things are fun. The 14 days of love are fun. But you know what you really need to hear is, oh, thank you so much for dinner tonight. Thank you so much for doing the dishes. You made the bed. Wow, I was going to make the bed. Thank you so much for making the bed. You brought the laundry upstairs. Thank you so much for doing that. You swept, you cleaned, you did whatever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You look so beautiful today. You look wonderful today. I am so, these little words of praise. I am so grateful to be your husband. I am so grateful to be your husband. To be a sacrificial lover. To think like Jesus, think about love. We think about serving one another. Then there's gratitude. Then there's gratitude. I really believe that if you have someone to love and somebody to love you, you are the luckiest person in the world. And I learned that this past year when I was so sick. My wife was my champion. Let me tell you, she was adamant that I go to the doctor because, I'm a guy. I hate going to the doctor. I could be, blood could be gushing out. Don't worry, it's a flesh wound. I'm fine. I don't need to go to a doctor. Go to the doctor. And so I'd go to the doctor. And the doctor said, so, Steve, why are you here? Because my wife made me. And he said, I'll never forget when he told me, you are the luckiest man in the world. You are the luckiest man in the world. Do you know why? Because men who are married, men who are in a significant relationship, live 10 to 15 years longer than men who don't. You know why? Because they have somebody looking out for their well-being. I thought, wow, I am the luckiest man in the world. When I think about my relationship with my kids, I think about, wow, I am the luckiest man in the world. My eldest son stepped into this whole new phase of his life. He bought his first home. I know, right? Oh, some of you have been down that path. Oh, and it's a fixer-upper. Oh. But they took possession of the home, and they're going to take about 8 weeks, and they're going to kind of do the whole remodel of the home. And suddenly, Dad is the smartest guy in the room. Dad, what am I supposed to do? And you know what I got to do yesterday and the day before? I got to spend the entire day, you know what I'm going to do tomorrow? I'm going to spend the entire day with my kids, my 2 boys. And I'm going to show, we were showing them how to hang drywall, how to mud, electrical, plumbing, and all this kind of stuff that goes into kind of owning a home. And you know what I felt? I felt sore in my back, but I felt gratitude. When I get to hang out with these guys, I'm getting choked up. I am the luckiest guy in the world to work with these guys. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have someone that I love. There's someone who loves me. We are the luckiest people in the world to be loved. And if we're going to think like Jesus, if we're going to think about love, we're going to think about this beautiful thing that we have is called relationships. Who's your Valentine? Who's your Valentine? Why do we like to think about Jesus being married? You know what? I think it comes down to is because if Jesus were married, if the Son of God were married, then it would make him more normal. It would make him like us. And I think it should be the reverse. That if the Son of God were married, you know what that means? It means then that all of our relationships are divine. All of our relationships are divine. Your marriage is sacred. Your significant other is sacred. Your children are sacred. Your siblings are sacred. Your in-laws are sacred. Your friends are sacred. Your life is sacred. Your life is holy. And if we're going to think about Jesus, we're going to think about Jesus. If we're going to think like Jesus, that's it. If we're going to think like Jesus, then we're going to think about love. Amen.